I only want the best for you. What would people say? You'll grow out of it. When I was your age, as long as you're under my roof, you'll listen to me. You should be wiser by now. It probably happened to every person at some point that they had no choice. They were given a task or an order by an authoritative figure, whether it was a parent, teacher, or boss at work, with which they did not exactly agree and which was often accompanied by these very phrases. Although they did not have a gun to their head and could have protested or even not fulfilled it, the possible consequences and pressure from their surroundings forced them to fulfill it. In short, they had a choice, but in reality, they did not have any choice. At least not of their own free will. Someone decided the whole thing for them. And one of the games that managed to imitate and explore this feeling best in 2025 was Silent Hill F, the latest installment in the Silent Hill series of games, which is, or at least used to be, at the top of the survival horror genre. However, in order to fully understand how and what exactly these feelings are expressed in this game, we need to take a closer look at the game. And a small warning about spoilers, I will discuss the plot of Silent Hill F, and I will also touch on the movie Interstate 60, Episodes of the Road. This is Hinako. Hinako, whose full name is Hinako Shimizu, has found herself in a difficult situation. She has been arranged to marry. That wouldn't be unusual, after all this is Japan in the 1960s, a time when this was quite common and still is in some Asian countries. But for Hinako, it's a particularly difficult spot where neither outcome is what she would have wanted. It's so difficult that we spend the game with two parts of Hinako, one that is against the marriage and one that is for it. That's basically the main plot of the game, which corresponds to the aforementioned problem of having no choice. But reducing Silent Hill F to just these few words would be a disservice to the game. The game is bursting at the seams with themes and symbolism related to this issue, and it's not just the main character's story, although everything is tied to it. The game breathes the feelings that a person forced into an arranged marriage would have. The decision in the form of an arranged marriage where Hinako has a certain but very limited freedom is one example of an other people's forced decision. But it is definitely worth looking more deeply into why this is actually the case, how marriage and its actors fit into our issues, and why Hinako actually has and does not have a problem with it. Hinako is not a typical girl of her time. She questions the established patterns of behavior of boys and girls. Where boys and girls usually consider potential romantic relationships, Hinako laments why people of the opposite sex cannot normally remain friends without ulterior motives. Of course, this cannot be attributed to anyone in particular. However, even if these are forced established traditions of society, they are still forced, and it is evident that they are largely alien to Hinako. Hinako also has a very bad experience with the opposite sex, mostly from her father, who is aggressive. He once attacked Hinako with a knife. On the other hand, there is Shu. Shu has been Hinako's partner since childhood. He supplies her with pills for headaches. And, as it turns out later, the pills do not only help with headaches, but also contain hakukuso, an unusually rare herb, with which Shu tries to thwart the arranged marriage. You see, Shu has a crush on Hinako, something he may not have chosen, but he decided to do something about it. And it is these Shu pills that are one of the catalysts of the whole game, changing the trajectory of Hinako's life, again without her involvement. Hinako doesn't have a very good experience with her gender either. Her friend Rinko constantly undermines her, she has a crush on Shu, just like he has on Hinako. Junko, her sister, is in her eyes oriented towards the result, the fastest way and not the choice, because she followed social conventions. The crowning glory is their mother, who is spineless in Hanako's eyes, and together with Junko, Hinako perceives them as unhappy despite what they tell her. All this leads Hinako to the idea that marriage is a bad choice. She will lose her identity and ties to family and friends, and on the contrary, she will have to prioritize her husband's family. In addition, there is a real chance that people will slander her, that money was more important, that she didn't give Shu a chance, which can be heard in one of the alleyways through which Hinako makes her way. However, this is also a difficult decision to influence since it is somebody else's one. On the other hand, marrying Kotoyuki would solve a lot, especially her family's financial distress. Her parents are responsible for this / not, as her father was robbed by a business partner and part of the money went to pay for her mother's surgery. These situations cannot be fully attributed to Hinako or even to her parents. Hinako would also improve her status and gain some power since Kotoyuki belongs to a wealthy clan, and as it turns out later, Hinako's mother is not completely spineless and helpless. Moreover, as it turns out, Hinako has met Kotoyuki before and they have been writing to each other. Marrying Kotoyuki would also solve the Hinako-Shu-Rinko love triangle, or at least Rinko would have free reign to court Shu. It even seems that Kotoyuki is not like other men. However, this is also mentioned in one of the many text entries, which could be paraphrased, for example, with the popular saying, "You catch more flies with honey than with vinegar." This is not a situation with a clear right choice, like Married Up from Brave or Heather in Silent Hill 3 found herself in. Hinako does not have it so easy. I remembered Suki from the series Avatar: The Last Airbender, who was a warrior but did not exclude romantic feelings towards the opposite sex. Unfortunately for Hinako, we have a bad situation on one hand and another bad situation on the other. And if a person does not make any decisions, then the situation will not be much better either. The clip you just saw is not that rare. Movies, TV shows, books, and other media are full of situations where the heroine or hero decides between seemingly only two options and ultimately chooses a hidden third. I would divert the tracks to them or even to the trolley problem, but this time I will not pull the lever. The clip shown was specifically from the movie Interstate 60 Episodes of the Road. Originally, I wanted to include only this one from the end of the movie, but when I recently watched the movie again, I found many more parallels there. So, this is Neil. Neil is also in a difficult situation. His father arranged for him to be admitted to law school for his birthday, in addition to a car which he mainly made himself happy with, so that Neil could follow in his footsteps. All Neil needs to do is go to the interview on October 15th, and he will get into that school. But Neil doesn't want to go there. He simply refuses to make his life easier with apparent advantages. He wants to be an artist, specifically a painter. Or at least he's not sure yet at the moment and would like to think about it some more. Which is why, for his birthday, he wishes to know the answer. Not just any answer, but the answer to his life. He is generally not the decisive type when, at the beginning of the film, he uses a website to decide things like, should I wear a tie to lunch? Where you enter a question and the page spits out a yes or no answer. Nowadays, he will probably use artificial intelligence for that. But this is the beginning of the millennium, so he has to make do with what he has. And what Neil has, above all, is a bucket on his head, which sets in motion the sequence of events for most of the film. After this, Neil starts seeing unusual things in real life, including a woman he's seen in his dreams before. The search for her leads him to signing up to deliver a package, which would be a routine matter. But this whole task has several big buts, starting with the fact that the interstate he takes to reach his destination is not on the maps, continuing with the fact that there are quite a few notable cities on the interstate that give Neil many opportunities to make a decision, and sometimes somebody decides for him, and ending with the fact that a killer is on the loose in that neck of the woods. And that brings us to the scene depicted. The interstate leads in two directions, from both of which police sirens are heard. Neil's car at the moment matches the description of the killer's vehicle. As we learn, just like Neil, the killer is also carrying a brown square package with the murder weapon in it. So, which way will Neil go? Neither one. He destroys the car only to subsequently see how a killer with a suspiciously similar past to that of Neil dies in a car explosion. A few scenes later, Neil goes back in time. How could he not? The film also stars Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd and was directed by Bob Gale. But the film leaves it up to viewer to decide what was real and what was the cause, much like Silent Hill F. So let's go back to it. We've already teased a few characters from Silent Hill F, but let's take a closer look at some of them. Kotoyuki, Hinako's fiancé, is not much better off than her. He comes from a family in the style of a classic soap opera because his father found a liking for a maid. However, in the end, by the fault of fate, he came to be the successor of the clan. Moreover, he had to say goodbye to Hinako despite the fact that she helped him in his youth during a fox attack. However, the question is to what extent it was really Kotoyuki, because after being bitten by that fox, he was like a changed person, and even in the end of the game, which is considered the real one, it is clear that he did not necessarily have to be so-called in his own skin when the QB speaks through his mouth. So was the liking for Hinako, or only part of it, due to Kotoyuki's own will, and was it not by chance something caused by someone else, or even magic? In English, there is a nice word for this with multiple meanings. Possess. To have a in possession, to own, but also to possess, to control. Considering the treatment of women as objects in the case of arranged marriages, Kotoyuki has this in common with Hinako. Even the aforementioned letter writing is tainted by influential intentions, as they smelled of sandalwood, a love potion ingredient according to the game's universe, a thing that, as usual, is not a subject of consent from both parties. And it's not just the potion, either. In general, the game is carried in the spirit of the supernatural and folklore, although the game deliberately obscures the truth and occasionally slips into cruel reality. Against the background of human events, local deities are fighting a war among each other, directly and indirectly benefiting from the decisions Hinako, who, by the way, was blessed with divine power, makes, which is why they try to influence the situation. Similarly, Sakuko, and as we learn, her mother also experienced something similar, was contacted by these deities, although to what extent this is a supernatural phenomenon and to what extent it is caused by reality, Sakuko was diagnosed with autism, is a question. Similarly, Sakuko warns Hinako in one of her letters that the school game Fox's Sacrifice, when names are written on the blackboard, a fox tells everyone their future and one of those people is granted good luck, is not just a child's game. That the fox does not tell people their future, that it decides it for them. However, the people around, especially in a small town, will not really deal with it. After all, something similar is mentioned in the game. Because around here, once the rumor gets out, people will never look at you the same way again. There are things we cannot influence. When we were born, where we were born, who we were born to. There are things we can influence. This is such an individual matter that I do not dare to list these things here. And then there are things we should not influence. This is also a rather complex topic that does not have a simple answer that would fit all cases. Sort of a foggy gray area. But there is one case where this applies almost unconditionally. Bodily autonomy and the ability to make decisions and behave independently, i.e. agency. I'm not saying that there are no exceptions, but in the vast majority of cases, I support the fact that this should be adhered to, especially in the case of women. Even in this day and age, when it would seem that feminism has achieved everything necessary, and that the plot of Silent Hill F is a relic of the past, this topic is still relevant, and it is necessary to talk about it. And it does not only concern women. It is enough to take into account conscription or simply the draft, for example, if for one reason or another a person does not want to do it. It is very easy to talk about it when there is no such threat, but it is always unpleasant to find out when a person loses the option to choose. The worst of all, if it is not by their own doing, if it is decided about them without them. You may be asking yourself now, despite the fact that we are talking about one of the parts of a survival horror game series, is this supposed to scare me? It should. We live in polarizing times. In times when the opposite side of the debate is demonized and eliminated instead of trying to find understanding and common ground with them. In times when at first glance it may seem that this is a so-called zero-sum game, i.e. what one player gains the other loses. But this is a misconception, even if it is only about ourselves. We are usually pitted against each other by a not always obvious third party with malicious intentions, who benefits from us getting carried away by emotions, prejudices, and routines while prioritizing opinions and feelings at the expense of facts. It's always a red flag when someone is against people being informed. No wonder the answer lies in ending number 4. Ebisugaoka in silence, often proclaimed as the true ending. This is because in the standard game, at least 2 other endings preceded. Enough time for the player, and probably Hinako, to gather enough information from the individual endings. Let's summarize them all. The first ending, into which Hinako and the player are forced together, and ironically, like Hinako, they don't have much of a choice, which is nothing new as was the case in Silent Hill 3. Although it's probably a better option than Silent Hill Homecoming, where you could have chosen the UFO ending right away. Depicts a state where Hinako doesn't make any specific choice. It's more of a state of avoidance, escape, and total breakdown since the time for choice has run out. The second and third endings are 2 sides of the same coin. Hinako makes a choice whether to accept or reject the marriage, but in neither case is the ending flawless for her, and moreover, decision comes from a third party, not from herself. The fourth ending is the most content heavy. Hinako chooses what she wants and Kotayuki does the same. The fifth ending is Alien. It is no coincidence that for the true ending, You need to play the game at least 3 times. The number 3 is a symbol of balance and harmony of body, mind and spirit in Japanese culture. Similarly, the ritual has 3 parts, and at one point Kotoyuki and Hinako also drink sake, which corresponds to the Japanese wedding tradition of Sansan Kudo, which could be translated as 3 times, 3 times, 9 times. It was only in the 4th ending that Hinako reconciled 2 parts of herself which were in conflict over the marriage by choosing what she herself wanted. It is simply necessary to give people the freedom to make decisions. It may be a bad decision, yes, but it will be their decision. And perhaps, thanks to original thinking, they will come to a decision that solves the seemingly unsolvable. Just ask James Tiberius Kirk how he succeeded in the Kobayashi Maru exercise in the Star Trek universe.